There we go. So I'm going to start just by introducing myself, and then we're going to get right into the questions. There's no agenda, and there's also no slides here, right? It's just the Zoom room. So I can't wait to get to know all of you a little better and to hear what your communication skills questions are. For those of you who I haven't met, either in person or online or otherwise, my name is Dr. Andrea Wojnicki. Please just call me Andrea. I'm an executive communication coach at Talk About Talk, where I've finally figured out what I really should be doing. This job gives me so much satisfaction. It's like my superpower. So what I do is I coach ambitious executives, I'm guessing like you, to reach their career goals by focusing on their communication so that you can establish credibility, create impact, and then that's when things will happen for you, right? So in my job as an executive communication coach, I have a podcast that comes out. Normally it's bi-weekly over the summer. If you haven't listened to the podcast, there's good news for you. This summer, for 10 consecutive weeks, we're on week 8 right now, we are re-releasing the top 10 episodes of all time. So if you just go however you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple or Spotify or even on YouTube, we've got them on video now. If you listen to the 10 consecutive ones this summer, starting with 160 to 170, it's the top 10 of all time. So you'll get quickly up to speed. So I have the podcast. I do one-on-one coaching. I do lots of corporate workshops. I've got contracts with Duke University, the University of Toronto Faculty of Management, University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine. And I also have an Inc. column where I write every couple of weeks an article in Inc. magazine. And the topics that I cover, as gathered, focus on communication skills, including what you would probably expect. So overcoming imposter syndrome, communicating with confidence, how to introduce yourself. That's a big one for me. Listening, storytelling, and more it's been focusing on personal branding. So I know there's a couple questions that people sent me focused on personal branding that I hope we can get to. In the past, I earned my doctorate of business at Harvard Business School, where my focus of my research was on interpersonal communication and word of mouth. So really, I wanted to understand not how to make people talk more in a manipulative way, but rather understanding why they were talking. And the really cool hypothesis that I created in my research and then proved using both qualitative and quantitative data is that when people provide word of mouth recommendations, it's really about their identity. They're really reinforcing their identity with their. Happy to talk about that. I always wonder why people are saying what they're saying or not saying what they're not saying. Anyway, I also worked in brand management in the past, so maybe it's not a surprise that I'm so focused on personal branding. And what else about me? I'm in Toronto, and I'm really, really looking forward to hearing some of your questions starting right now. Who's got a question for me? Paul.
Yeah, Andrea, thanks for this session. First of all, it's a privilege. Glad to meet all of the participants here. I'm a business owner. So the question would be, how do you differentiate? I want to promote the company brand. For example, my company is called iConnect in helping establish seamless eye contact in video communication. So we are working with a marketing sales specialist kind of person, and he said, Paul, always try to build your brand. So I was trying to differentiate building my brand like a Paul Chintapalli versus the company brand. I mean, next month I'm going to speak at an investor forum in Frisco. That's a multi-purpose, investment plus other things, networking, whatnot. So what way you suggest, focus on myself or on the company brand? How do you differentiate in that setting?
That's a fantastic question, Paul. So just to paraphrase the question, just to make sure I'm answering the right question, it's how do I really think about and then build my personal brand in the context of my company brand, where I am the leader, the entrepreneur, the founder of the organization. I actually coach a lot of entrepreneurs. So, and this is very common. So I would take you through the exact same personal branding process. And right at the beginning, you said that the sales and marketing folk that you are working with, he said, you need to build your brand. And I right away was like, oof. So what you need to do first is create or articulate your brand. So before you can start promoting, and this is really common, I'm finding in, personal branding is definitely having a moment, right? Probably because of the internet and so on. A lot of coaches will focus immediately on getting followers, promoting yourself. And I say, hang on, let's back up and identify who you are. So if you think about the personal branding process, it's really two big steps. Step one is building or articulating it, and step two is communicating it. So, and then that may sound overwhelming, right? So how do I build it or articulate it still, even though it's those two simple steps? So there are some very simple exercises that you can run through even yourself, where you think about, what makes me unique compared to others? What makes me as a person unique? And then you can also get input from others. You can do personality tests and so on to input to who you are. And then once you've articulated what your main themes are, then you're ready to start communicating. So the idea here is quality in, quality out, garbage in, garbage out. You spend more time in step one, and then step two, the communicating part will be so much easier. I still haven't answered your question, I realize, right? So how do I reconcile this tension between me, the entrepreneur and business owner, and me, the person? So what I've done with several of my clients is we created almost like a Venn diagram. So a Venn diagram is like two overlapping circles.
Right.
One of the circles is you, and you just do what I said, right? So you take a blank sheet of paper out, you start listing what your unique themes are, you get input from other people, you fill that circle. The other circle is what your firm does and what it represents, right? And then you'll find that there is a lot of overlap. There should be, actually, especially if it's a small company and you're running it. And then when you're introducing yourself in a personal context, you know that you're going to share more of the personal things. If you're introducing yourself in a professional context, you're going to focus on the overlap and then also what the firm does, right? So it's not like you're changing who you are, but you're thinking very strategically about what the main points of differentiation are about you personally and professionally and your organization. So for the last couple years, I've run, I don't know how many, I've actually lost track, maybe about 6 personal branding boot camps. They run for 1 month. We have one coming up in September. If you want to join, I know for sure there are at least 2 entrepreneurs in that group. So we can talk about that offline if you want. It's a very efficient way. It's in 1 month. You're accountable to yourself and to the group, and you'll learn the process that I take you through. People are always surprised. It's like the more you learn, the quickly it becomes overwhelming, but then I guide you on the process. But one of the strategic principles, I'm going to leave you with this one last thought. One of the strategic principles of personal branding is that you're not changing who you are in different contexts. You're always the same authentic person, but you filter. So I see some heads nodding. People may have seen me, heard me say this in the podcast or been to other online Q&As. The keyword here is filter, right? So we are all sophisticated, smart. Well, we're all sophisticated, complicated, smart humans who fulfill many, many roles in our lives, right? We're parents, we're partners, we have hobbies, we have a professional persona, we have people that we're managing, people that we're reporting to, and on and on and on. If you shared all of that with everyone all the time, we'd all think you're crazy. So we filter, keyword, I called it the F word of personal branding is filter. You filter what parts of yourself that you share, but they're all important. So in the personal branding bootcamp, we create a list of 12 to 15 themes about you, and they include, your geography and your family and your hobbies, because those are all important parts of you. It's just that you're not going to, if you're standing up in a conference and they say, Paul, can you introduce yourself to the audience? You're not going to start by saying, I'm a whatever, Texas, whatever fan, or you know what I mean? Like you're not going to start with the personal, but it is still a part of who you are. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, it gave me a lot of thoughts. I'm making some mental notes. Thank you very much.
I'll send you the link to this so you can re-listen.
Okay.
Who else has a question for me? Rob, I know you do. He warned me on LinkedIn that he has a question.
It's not
Nice.
No, it's not, so specific to the whole idea of personal branding. So that's why I was gonna wait, but I'm happy to chime in now if you like. And I'll just give the context. So I'm actually a strategist and around communication. And full transparency, Andrea and I have worked together before. I've just wrapped up a very long, ongoing contract with a very good client. Went on for 6 years. Meta, and working as both a brand and a content strategist with them. But now I'm sort of rebuilding, going back into the freelance world and sort of rebuilding my business, which is a little consultancy. So my question is really about best practices in terms of LinkedIn. For me, it's just like, how much time? Like, I sort of think I have a good idea of what I want to say to build the time, but every time I go on and they just, these people seem to be on it all day, and I just don't have that kind of time. So I was wondering if there's any best practices about, in terms of scanning LinkedIn, looking for information, and then also the amount of effort you put in to, being a creator on LinkedIn, posting and adding value to conversations or putting out your own information.
Sure. So, Rob, this is a great, by the way, Rob and I worked together, 25
Okay.
years ago, when I was a brand manager at Kraft Foods, and he was the super smart creative director. Is that the title, Rob?
I was a group creative director. Yeah.
At the advertising agency. So he was actually writing the commercials that my employer was producing. And so we worked very closely together. And then we reconnected maybe 2 years ago or so. And I interviewed him for an episode. It's episode number 151 on the power of storytelling. He's got a lot of great pointers if you want to look that up and on Talk About Talk. This question about LinkedIn is, I think, relevant for all of us, whether you have a business that you're trying to, get traction on in LinkedIn and make sales, or whether you're just using it as a place where you're establishing your professional identity, which I hope we all are. If you're not, please do start to do so. At least update your profile so you have something that you're proud of, right? And then the question is like, what do I post and how do I get traction with it? So I've got a couple pointers. He did ask me this question in advance, so I did think about what I was going to say about this. The first thing to think about is really, I know Rob he's very strategic, right? So it's, what's your objective? Is your objective just to post something so that people see you're active, or is it to reinforce part of your identity, or is it to get followers, or is it to make sales? So think about what your objective is, but not in a vacuum. So just like you would if you were walking into a job interview or into a sales negotiation, right? You don't just think about what your own objective is. Also think about what the other person's objective is, which is obvious if you're trying to get a job or doing a sales negotiation. But even in the case of posting on LinkedIn, think about what LinkedIn's objective is. This is an epiphany that occurred to me recently that I've heard validated. LinkedIn is an algorithm that will reward you if you help them achieve their goals, them being LinkedIn's goals, not the other people on the platform, but LinkedIn. So LinkedIn wants to have engaging content that people like and comment on and share, and that keeps them on LinkedIn. So right away, that should be sending off alarm bells, right? You need to create engaging content, not necessarily reposting, but creating engaging content that is going to garner comments and likes, okay? And ideally even reshares or reposts. So they literally assign points to your posts when you get likes and comments and so on. So Rob, to answer your question, like, how do I think about this? So first of all, think about not just what your objective is, but what their objective is. And then if there's one thing I would say in answer to your question is, once you make a post, the 90 minutes after you make the post are the most critical, because in the LinkedIn algorithm, I've heard it's 30 minutes, I've heard it's 1 hour, and I've heard it's 90 minutes. So I'm going to say, for safety's sake, it's 90 minutes after you post. Stick around. Anyone that comments, you reply to the comment and you thank them. So you're actually adding another comment, right? And you're engaging with the people that are engaging, and then the algorithm reads that as, oh, it's not necessarily going to go viral, right? But it's getting traction. So I think that this is like a game changer, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to do LinkedIn on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. and I'm just going to post this stuff. It's like, no, you better figure out a time when you can stick around. And the other thing is, and I this is really important to me because I post about 5 times a week. Like, what time of day or time of week are people on LinkedIn? It is definitely concentrated on Tuesday to Thursday. But I mean, I see people posting 7 days a week and they're still getting traction. If I had to choose, I would go in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And when I go in and when I make a post, I would stick around. Like, not immediately, maybe I'd go do something for half an hour and then I'd come back and answer everybody's comments. Does that help, Rob?
Yeah, it follows very much like, as I said, I've been working with Meta and both for creators, both on Facebook and Instagram, and it's following the same sort of recommendations they make in terms of original content is that gets engaged, boosts the algorithm. But still the question is just like, in terms of being up to date with what's going on at LinkedIn and your network, is it 20 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, just scanning and seeing what's there, or have any guidance on that?
I mean, I think it's kind of like acquiring an exercise routine, right? It's like choose something that works for you. So if you are a morning person, and it also depends on if you love it. Like, if you love doing it, maybe it's your reward at the end of the day, but or it's the first thing you do in the morning to put yourself in a good mood. I don't know. Or if you're not a big fan of social media, maybe it's something that you want to get out of the way. So is the question how frequently you do it, or?
Yeah, just trying to judge a reasonable amount of time, because I can go down the rabbit hole. I can get started on it and realize that an hour's gone by. I've been, either commenting on people's posts or, oh, there's new posts, and I go back up to the top and start all over again. Because it's the whole fear of missing out,
Yeah.
phenomenon.
Yeah.
That was just what I was looking for the guidance.
So I would go back to what I said at the very beginning and think about what your objective is. So if you're trying to increase followers, and it sounds like you're looking for potential clients, you want to remind people constantly of what you're doing. So if I were you, I would create a content public, like a release schedule, where it's maybe 3 times a week I'm releasing a newsletter, a post, a quote, something that demonstrates my expertise, commenting on other people's posts. Maybe make a checklist for yourself. The other thing that I want to do is make sure that I'm active in my indirect competitors' feeds, right? So other people who follow that person will start to recognize my name. So I know you have no direct competitors, Rob, because you're so unique. I'm just kidding. But I just actually read this yesterday, that one of the key ways of growing your audience with relevant folks, right, is to go where your competitors are and be loud. Of course, you have to add value, because right away people will know if you're being spammy. But that's what I like about LinkedIn, actually. This you can just go right by the spam. I have this rule that I accept anyone's connection request unless their sales pitch is in their headline. If their sales pitch is in their headline, I'm not going to accept it, because I know what's coming next, right?
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And the last thing I'm going to say is I make rules for myself on LinkedIn, and then I adjust them probably monthly, right? Like, I say, I'm checking LinkedIn twice a day and I'm posting 5 times a week, right? That's what I do. That's what my strategy is right now. And like I just said, I will accept a connection request with anyone as long as their sales pitch isn't in their headline. If it is, I will just decline. But those rules are not the rules that I always had. Different rules work for different people.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Who else has a question? Hey.
My name's Moni, California. I am so grateful to you. I listen to your podcast regularly, particularly the one on precision when it comes to interviewing. So I'm interviewing a lot. I'm part of the great tech masses that seems to get laid off. And my question has to do with a type of interviewing that I think was first pioneered by Amazon Web Services, or they call it the STAR, and it's really about tell me a time when. And I've got 55 slides of tell me a time when you had a conflict, tell me a time when you had this campaign. I'm in marketing. I specialize in alliance marketing, two companies coming together and in partnerships to go conquer the world. And the interviewer generally has a panel of questions they need to ask,
Yep.
and then fill out a form afterwards. And I find it so disarming and out of context. Sometimes I get sort of a deer in the lights trying to remember what story to tell or how to address it because it's out of context. I tend to interview better when it's like, what's your business problem? This is how I would approach it. This is how I approached it. And this is how they answered it.
Yeah.
So if you had any suggestions for me on approaching those questions, I've got another round of interviews with a big company next Tuesday.
I've got lots of suggestions for you. It's Moni.
Moni, like Tony.
Thank you for the great question. So first of all, for those of you who aren't familiar, the STAR method is a common framework that people use to answer situation-based interview questions. It's situation, task, action, result, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
So I recently coached an amazing woman that I met. She's a firefighter and she was going for chief, and I got the shivers. She got the job, but she was like, it's all going to be situation based, Andrea. And I coached her and I said, okay, so you need to like nail this framework. And by the way, interviewers, I did some research on it for her. Interviewers don't mind if they hear you explicitly using the framework. So if you say, I'm going to tell you the situation, and this is an exaggeration, right? You probably wouldn't do this, but if you say, I'm going to tell you the situation, the task I had, what I did, the action that I took, and what the results were. Okay, here we go, right? This is what the research said that I read. They actually don't mind if they hear you explicitly using the framework. So I wouldn't recommend that you back away from that. And if you have answers, so what I did with her was we figured out we hypothesized what the main skills were that they were trying to measure for this chief job. And then we brainstormed, or she independently brainstormed, what 2 or 3 stories would answer that or demonstrate that skill. Okay. But she didn't write them out, right? So it's not like you have a script. I want to make sure that people are really clear on this, whether you're introducing yourself or answering a question or you're meeting someone in the elevator, whatever it is, scripts do not work. You want frameworks in your mind, like the STAR framework, but without memorizing something like a rehearsed elevator pitch. So she had this beautiful grid of all of the skills and then the 2 or 3 stories that could answer. There were always 2. And I said, no more than 3, because then it just gets overwhelming. And by the way, it's okay if that one story addresses several skills, right? Because then you can say, well, remember I told you about when this happened. Well, this situation also illustrates this skill or this challenge. Let me tell you how, right? So that's just in answer to elaborate a little bit on the STAR method. Your question otherwise, Moni, was about preparing yourself so that you don't get caught off guard or become tongue-tied.
Yeah, I go to like sitting on the witness stand mode, like what's the right answer? And I take myself out of that and just go back to having a natural conversation.
So instead of thinking about what they want to hear, try to shift your mindset to what are the unique things about me that I want them to know? Where if I'm communicating these things clearly and I get the job, great. If I communicate these things clearly and I don't get the job, that means this job was not for me. So this is really about your personal brand. This is about identifying, I said this before, the 12 to 15 things about you that you know that are positive, unique, and relevant about you.
Okay. Okay.
I caught it. I just muted everybody else. So if you've taken the time to identify the 12 to 15 things about you, your confidence will be elevated just generally, never mind when you're going into an interview, because you've identified the things that are unique and positive about you, right? And it also provides you with focus and direction. So when you're answering the question, you can say, well, you asked me about, I don't know, I can't think of something off the top of my head. You asked me about how I deal with challenges, and you're in your head, you're thinking, I know that my leadership style is collaborative. So you say, well, as a collaborative leader, blah, blah, blah. Like it just comes naturally because you've been thinking about it. And again, you're not memorizing what those things are. When you have a strong personal brand, like I tell people that the three benefits are elevated confidence, improved focus and direction, and you're controlling your narrative, right? And this is really important when you're in a job interview. Like if I were you, at the end of most job interviews, they say, is there anything else you want to add or ask? I would say, I would have something ready. I would say, one last thing. If there's one thing that you remember about me that differentiates me from other candidates, I'm quite certain it's this. And then boom, right? I do that when I'm hosting podcast episodes or if I'm in a workshop. I will stop and I'll say, if there's one thing you take away from this, it's this one thing, right? When it comes to personal branding, it's focusing on what makes you unique. And I say, take a screenshot. Unique is better than better. Stop comparing yourself to others and think about what makes you unique, right? Stop trying to answer the question in the way that you think that they want it to be answered, and answer it in a way that's true to you, that illustrates your unique value.
Right. One last thing. I was river rafting on the Tuolumne this weekend. And for some reason or other, my cell phone was in the bag. Your podcast started playing. I'm hearing somebody talk. Who is it? I go, I know that voice. It's yours. Your podcast started playing on my phone. So you went river rafting with us this weekend. Thank you.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, so much fun. So Moni, the fact that you went river rafting also tells me something about you, right? It tells me that you have a sense of adventure, that maybe you enjoy the outdoors, and you said with us, so it's like with other people, you're social. So think about the things that you do and that you are that are unique, and focus on those. This is my one answer for you. Okay, the one thing that I hope you get from this
One
is
thing you get.
one thing is focus instead on your unique value and expertise and passions as opposed to what you think they're looking for. This could be a game changer. I hope it works for you.
Thank you. I'm getting chills.
Yeah, that's always a good sign. Who else has a question? I'm looking at the chat here too. Thank you, Priscilla, for putting, it's like dating, you don't want to show up as a different person in the beginning of a relationship. I've got all sorts of conversations about that too. Priscilla put a link to the HBR article that I published actually 2 years ago from right now. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, I recommend you just click on the link and you can read it after. But this idea of the 3-point self-introduction framework is the context of the #1 most downloaded Talk About Talk podcast episode. It's episode number 86, how to introduce yourself, present, past, future. It goes into detail. Episode became so popular, I wrote it up, I sent it to HBR, they published it, and a year and a half later, it was awarded the top 3 most downloaded article of 2024, and people are still talking about it. So it's very simple. You start with the present, and then you go to the past, and then you go to the future. It's something that you can practice and implement immediately. So hi, my name is Andrea. I'm an executive communication coach at Talk About Talk. And then you go to the past. You say, depending on the context, 1 to 3 things that help you establish credibility or achieve your goal, whatever the context is. If you've been working on your personal brand, you kind of imagine your personal branding template and think, what are the 2 or 3 things that I want to mention about myself? When I introduced myself at the beginning of this office hours, I absolutely used this framework, right? I talked about my degree, I talked about my research, I talked about what I have done. And then step 3 is the future. So this is the step that a lot of people forget when they're introducing themselves. They say their name and then they kind of tell a little bit of their biography and then they go, yeah, that's me, as opposed to ending it with an enthusiastic statement about the future, and ideally your future with the person that you're introducing yourself to. So if you're in a job interview, you could say, and I'm really excited to learn more about this job because everything that I've read so far says that I'm made for this, whatever it is. Or if you're meeting a new teammate that you're working with, you could say, I'm really looking forward to getting to know you better. And I know that we're going to knock this project out of the park, right? So you get the idea. You end with a future oriented statement of enthusiasm. I use it all the time too, Priscilla, because, well, it works. So many people tell me that it's a game changer, especially when you're caught off guard. You know how your brain, let's go around the screen and introduce ourselves, and your brain's like, oh, what do I say? How long do I talk? Should I say something personal? And then you realize you're not listening to anything that anyone said. This framework is beautiful because you can listen to what people say and then you say, oh, okay, present, past, future. The only challenge with this, if there is one, with this framework is to remember it is not chronological. It is not past, present, future. When I first released this HBR article, a couple people reposted it on, and they would say, this is a great new framework by Dr. Andrea Wojnicki, la, 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 past, present, future. So I privately messaged them and I said, hey, thank you so much for posting the article. Can you just edit it? Because it actually starts with the present. It's not chronological. Yeah. That sentence was in the original draft that I sent to HBR. It said the one challenge with this framework, the only challenge really, is that it's not chronological, and people fall into the trap of thinking that it should be. You start with the present, you anchor yourself with the present. Anyway, when they were editing it, they took that sentence out, and sometimes people don't catch that. You start with the present. Okay? And you can customize it to be as short or as long as you want. If you're in a job interview and they say, tell me about yourself, use this framework. All right. Who's got another question? Maybe something to do with confidence, or just take yourself off mute and talk, or put it in the chat. Okay.
So I'm wondering if, first of all, thank you very much for the session. And having been in various corporate environments, I'm wondering if you have any tips for those of us who have had to address large groups of people in crisis situations and may have to address tough questions and have to, or are put on the spot and are having to react very quickly to those difficult questions.
So, I mean, that's a very general question, I think. Sounds like, do you have a specific scenario or?
Just general tips. I'm wondering if you can help with just tips with situations where you're a leader and you're handling a tough situation or a crisis even situation, and people are reacting and people are launching very, very challenging questions and having to react and maintain your professionalism as well.
Yeah. So the classic advice from PR, public relations professionals, right, is to spend time creating your talking points. So what is the main point that you want people to understand? And I always start there. So what is it that you are trying to communicate to the group? Is it we made a mistake and we're fixing it? Or is it that this is the plan that we're following? Like, be really clear yourself on what it is. And this is a time when having a rehearsed couple of sentences about what that point is can probably help a lot. The danger is that people get, it's sometimes, depending on the context, like emotionally charged, and then they get accusatory or emotional, and then you feel like obliged to make the person feel better, and you end up saying something, and then people will basically quote you back to yourself. Well, you said this, right? So that's kind of like the downward spiral that can happen. So that's why really anchoring yourself in what the main objective is, but being open and authentic about it, right? So you can say, if someone gets really emotional, you can say, I understand you're very emotional about this, or that you're accusing us of this thing, or whatever the context is, talking about it directly, and then saying, but again, at this point, our next steps are, or a decision is, or whatever, and then going back to that main talking point. Yesterday, I'm thinking about this. Yesterday, I was as a participant in a workshop, and there was someone in the work. It was at the end, they did an open Q&A, and someone was asking questions that were pretty charged, and it wasn't exactly a crisis situation, but it was pretty charged. And I noticed that the moderator handled it beautifully. She said very respectfully, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but I'm going to ask my assistant so-and-so to talk with you about that offline. Next question. And I was like she's not ignoring him. She's not putting him in his spot. This is beautiful advice. So having a comrade in your group that can help you, I think, is also fantastic, because it's not that you're playing good cop, bad cop, but you can divert someone if they're, taking you off what your main objective is for the communication. I follow Amy Gallo at Harvard Business School. She's very smart about not necessarily crisis situations, but it's more about dealing with difficult people. And you might find some advice there. One of her big things that she talks about, which is kind of obvious once you hear it, but it's really smart, is focusing on the situation, not on the person. Right? So instead of saying, you said this or you thought that, it's more, we're in this situation and how we're going to work on this, right? That can make a big difference too, and kind of take the adrenaline out of the situation, maybe. Does that help?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
I'm looking at Marcia's comment. Your comment reminds me, I review many resumes for college students, but I see good resumes filled with skills, but the reader has to guess what the applicant is interested in doing. I'm not seeing professional objectives. Is that common now? So, I'm not a career coach. I'm a communication coach, but I do help people a lot with their professional communication, which includes things like their LinkedIn profile and their resume and so on. And even a couple of weeks ago, I was helping my son. He's 20. And so he's graduating from college soon and he's looking for a job. And I read his resume and I was like, okay, so you got all these skills, but I don't know what differentiates you from every other computer scientist on the planet, right? So I really think it's important. Again, I sound like a broken record, that you identify your unique skills and passions, right? It could be your unique, as Marcia said, professional objectives, or it could be your unique expertise, or for many of you, it's probably your unique leadership style. What is it about your leadership style that differentiates you from other people in the industry or sector or function that you work in? It's really helpful for managers. And this is what actually gets them going off their form that they're filling out when they're interviewing you, right? Agnes, you have a question?
Hey, yes, I do. Hey, sorry, I was a little bit late, so you might have already answered this question, but I was wondering, in terms of personal branding, when implementing that, how do you transition into your new brand? Like, do you announce it? Do you tell people, or do you just kind of subtly implement it a step at a time and just evolve? If you could answer that.
Awesome question, Agnes. So I have people in the boot camps that I run say, either publicly or privately, help, Andrea, my brand's changing. Like, what do I do? Do I delete all my followers? Do I, make an announcement? Like, I'm reintroducing myself in my new persona. And I say, calm down. I have one word for you. Congratulations. Why congratulations? Because you should be evolving. So I kind of lied, or you missed this earlier, Agnes. I said, I simplify the process of developing your brand into 2 steps. Step 1 is creating or articulating your brand, and step 2 is communicating it. The lie is there is the 3rd step. It's actually a loop, so I call it updating. You should be, you not only can change your brand, you actually should change your brand. So I just want to start by saying, instead of feeling stressed out about your brand evolving, you should be proud of the fact that it's evolving. If it's not evolving, you are in trouble. Okay. So your personal brand is never done. You can say it's done for today, but then you wake up tomorrow's a new day and the world's changing, technology's changing, your family's changing, you're getting older, you're acquiring new skills, you're getting new credentials, and on and on and on. So it better change. And if it's not, like I said, unless you're in retirement and you're just hoping things stay the same, that's a different story. But when we're young in our careers, we want our brands to change. I would say,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's an amazing opportunity for you then to create a narrative about how your past informs your future, right? So I don't know if you want to share some specifics about what your previous brand is and what your new brand is becoming, but I'm sure there's it wasn't random that you ended up where you are now, right? And so there's a way of creating a narrative here.
Yeah, that's thanks for answering that. That's something I'm working on. But as I work on it and as I look to implement it, I just want to better understand in my head how I'll roll it out. So I think I have some time with you, so we can talk some more later.
Okay, so yeah, in terms of logistically or tactically how you're going to do it, have seen people on LinkedIn saying it's been a while since I introduced myself. I am whatever, and then And then you can use the present, past, future framework in a few short paragraphs. I mean, people don't log on LinkedIn to read reintroductions of people, right? So you need to be somehow compelling. But I have noticed this, and I've even heard people commenting on the fact that this has become a bit of a trend, that you reintroduce yourself to everyone that's following you. Like I recently surpassed 5,000 followers. There's no way I know all of those people. So I'm wondering if I should be reintroducing myself too. And it should sound a little different than it did a year ago, never mind 5 years ago, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Great question.
Thank you.
Any other questions here? I've got a couple here. Jump in anytime. Okay. I have a question from Sophie, who asked, how can I promote my brand without sounding arrogant? And I that's a shortened version of what she asked me. I get this question all the time, so I thought I would share it here, and she'll be able to listen to it later because we're recording it. I have a few answers depending on the context, right? So when you're quote unquote promoting or communicating your brand, I mean, we're all doing that all the time. You sitting there right now, your posture, your background, your tone of voice, how you have your hair, everything. We're always communicating our brand. That said, we've all heard that you need to promote your strengths so that people understand what's going on, or what your true identity is, or what your value is. So I've got a couple of suggestions. The first one is my 3 magic words. Are you ready for them? People tell me. So chances are your unique strengths are something that people have commented on before. So I'm not telling you that you should lie and just put these 3 magic words in front of anything, but it's the things that people have complimented you on or mentioned about you as your strengths. Might sound weird if you just say them without the people tell me 3 magic words. An example for me, it sounds a little bit weird when I'm being interviewed by an HR manager and they say, well, so what differentiates you compared to other corporate trainers? And the truth is, well, I've got my academic credentials, but it's also my energy. And I hear this all the time. People say, Andrea, you have this energy that when you're in front of a room or even just one-on-one, you have this energy, right? It sounds weird if I say, well, you should hire me because of my energy, right? That sounds weird. But if I say, people tell me, my clients tell me that they find my energy level in coaching sessions and workshops to be really engaging, it sounds so much better. So, and it's like a third person testimonial because it really is, even though it's coming from you, you're telling them what other people say about you. So the first thing is, if you feel awkward about saying positive things about yourself, not especially, but including in an interview, Moni, right? You could say, people tell me I am a leader who, blah, 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 right? Beautiful, beautiful. So 3 magic words. The second thing, I've got 3 suggestions for you here. Always the power of 3, right? My second suggestion may surprise you, but it's to be direct or explicit about the fact that you're feeling uncomfortable sharing this strength with them. And you could say something like, I hope I don't sound arrogant, but I know that one of my strengths are my dedication to blah, 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 or my unparalleled ability to blah, 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 right? So if you preface it with, I don't want to sound arrogant, or sometimes it feels awkward talking about my strengths. Just the point here is preface your strength that you want to communicate with your kind of authentic phrase that articulates how you're feeling awkward about it. But you can't do that all the time. If you go around all the time saying, I know this sounds weird, but I'm great. I know this sounds weird, but it's like, okay, enough. So you got to save that one for when you need it. Okay. And then the third point that is actually a mindset and a tactic related to personal branding that's really, really crucial, that helps people feel more confident sharing things about themselves, is to remember that you are not saying you're good at everything. Arrogant people are always right and they're good at everything, right? They have no faults, they're perfect, whatever. That is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about identifying your unique strengths. So you could even say, listen, I know I'm not good at everything, but I do know what I am good at. I'm good at running workshops, or I'm good at whatever, working in this tech sector where I can right? So focus on the fact that you're focused, and then you're not acting like overly self-promotional or arrogant, right? So when I run these boot camps or coach people on their personal brand, and we create this, each person goes in with a generic personal branding template. And when they come out, they have 12 to 15 themes that are completely unique to them. How is that arrogant or self-promotional? It's not. It's really just having taken the time to identify what those themes are. I see we've got 5 minutes left. Wanted you all to know that if you are interested in participating in the boot camp, in the September boot camp, I'm going to get Priscilla to put the link to the boot camp in the chat for the next 24 hours. So until I guess 1 p.m. tomorrow, there's a $200 off coupon. It's office hours to make it easy for me. I know it's the people that were in the office hours. It's those, all one word is the promo code, and it's $200 off. And if you have any questions, you can ask me questions here, or you can DM me in LinkedIn or send me an email. My email is andrea@talkabouttalk.com if you're interested in that. But we've still got 5 minutes. Who hasn't asked a question or has another question? I have a question here from Faisal. Okay, this is the last, does anyone else have any other questions? Otherwise, I'm just going to revert to this question. No? Okay. So Faisal's question was, what if the thing that I'm uniquely good at doesn't sound unique? I'm in tech sales. I know people buy from me because they trust me, but that isn't really unique. Okay, I told Faisal, I love this question because in many of the, especially one-on-one coaching sessions that I've had with folks, this is pretty common. There's a wealth advisor, a very, very successful wealth advisor that I coached a couple of years ago. He's up in Muskoka for anyone that's from Canada. He's like north of Toronto, extremely successful. And when we were identifying his personal brand, he said, people, I'm successful because people trust me. And I was like, okay, you and every wealth advisor, like you better be trusted, right? And he goes, no, I really am. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, I get to know these families really well when I'm advising them on their wealth. And usually it's the husband that dies first, and I will get a phone call from the wife, and she'll say, Mike, I need your help. My husband just died. And he'll say, oh, okay, what can I do? You need me to get your will in order? She goes, no, actually, I just don't know what to do. I haven't even called my kids yet. And I said, what? Your clients call you before they call? And he said, yeah, I'm like a member of the family, highly trusted, whatever. And I was like, okay. So trust definitely is a part of your personal brand. And that reminded me of another story. I was coaching a guy who's a CEO. He was out of a job because his company got bought, right? So he's like looking to transition to a new company to lead. And I said, what's your strength? And he goes, I'm a really nice guy. And I said, okay, come on. You can't have nice guy as your personal brand. And he goes, but I really am. The last time I left an organization and I went to a new organization, within 6 months, like 50% of this small department had followed me, and I didn't reach out to them. They came to me. They all followed me. And I was like, okay, you are a nice guy. We got to put better words around it. We're going to create a better narrative around it. But I'm telling you these stories because sometimes the thing that's unique about you might not sound unique, but there's a way through stories that you can make it something that is very compelling for people, right? Like you want people, just like if you're giving a presentation or doing a Q&A or in a job interview, you want people to remember something about you. If it ends up being something that you think they may disregard as not unique, you really are compelled to put words around it, and more likely, and Rob would agree with this, stories around it to make it memorable and to really resonate with them. Okay. So I guess my challenge to each of you is to think about, what are your unique superpowers, your expertise and or your passions, where you add value that are unique to you, and then ask yourself, like, how do I talk about that? What's the narrative around how I developed that superpower? And what are the stories that define it, that exemplify that superpower? I hope that answers Faisal's question. We'll find out. Thank you so much to all of you for being here, for the fantastic questions. As you can probably tell, I really love doing this. I really do. I hope to see you all on LinkedIn and beyond. Reach out to me anytime.